Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. No surprises, we're going to be talking about Modern Horizons, the cards that have been spoiled today, as well as I'm going to give my 2 cents on the entire set as a whole, at least what so far has given us signal-wise, as well as talking about the supply of Modern as a whole. It seems that people fall into one of two camps. Camp A, where you think that a card being reprinted in Modern Horizons is going to cause more supply than what the being legal in Modern is going to cause the demand, and therefore card prices will go down. Keep in mind this is a print-to-demand set, so the more demand for the set, the more supply will be injected into the system. Or you're in Camp B, where you think that the demand of Modern will outstretch any sort of supply that Modern Horizons can hope to put into the system. So here are the arguments for the two. We'll start with Camp B. Camp B believes that since Modern is such a deep format as far as player base, that a card becoming legal in the format, like this card Fact or Fiction right here, is going to eat up all of the supply from Modern Horizons plus more and cause the card to go up in value. So getting in on Fact or Fiction right now is actually a bargain because the demand, overall demand from this being put into a ton of Modern decks that already exist will be greater than the supply of all the Fact or Fictions that existed and the one coming in. And the arguments for Camp A, which I tend to fall into, is that being a print-to-demand set is basically its own undoing. If these cards become popular, then the set will become popular, and if the card prices ever hit a certain value, then people are just going to buy these Modern Horizons booster box, especially the mass pack openers, to where they're just going to continue to open this up until it goes out of stock, and that won't happen until basically it's not being sold anymore. So it's its own undoing there. And that the supply can never, or the demand can never catch up for a supply in a 2019 set. So that's kind of usually where people are basing their investment strategies on. I kind of get the Camp B because we have seen some of these phenomenons in the past, like when Tarmogoyf was printed in Modern Masters 1. Even though it was reprinted, the demand of the new Modern format was much greater than Modern Masters 1, as well as all the supply that existed, and it caused a big buying spree. Modern Masters 1, the release of it, caused a big buying spree in deck building in Modern to where the supply of Modern Masters 1 could not keep up with the demand. I personally, though, don't think that that can be and we've also seen that too with some of the commander decks that have been printed, that even though it's a brand new commander set, that the commander cards, like the cards, especially Commander 2017 with Brea and Atraxa, those cards went in many decks, even beyond just their namesake decks. And the demand for Commander 2017 was so great that it even, or Commander 2016, I believe, was so great that it even outstretched the new supply for some of the cards that were reprinted in those sets. Again, I see the argument. I do not think that that's going to be the case. We're talking about a limited print run for Commander 2016. It was very limited, much lower than most of us thought. And the same thing in Modern Masters 1. So the precedence is for being in that camp. I really don't think that they're the ones that have the sound argument. I think it's the Camp A where the supply is just going to be incredibly high. And so getting in on cards like Fact or Fiction, or getting in on cards that you're still speculating like the Baleful Strix, or some of these other cards that have been spoiled like Flusterstorm going up after it was spoiled in the set is probably not where you want to be. Now Flusterstorm is a different case because it is just a buy a box promo. So there is going to be about the amount, I would say, according to Mark Rosewater's stats about when the Take Extra Turn card, can't think of it at the moment, from Core 2019 came out. People are freaking out because they're like, why do you make a Mythic a buy a box promo if it sees play in Standard? And Mark Rosewater shot back that actually it being a Mythic has more supply than the rest of the Mythics in the set. That there are more copies of the Mythic buy a box promo in print run than there are of Mythics that are contained in the entire set, even through all of its waves and all of its printings. So with Flusterstorm, you got to think that it is like a Mythic for the buy-a-box. I don't know why they didn't make it a Mythic. It's kind of funny they put it as a rare when usually buy-a-box are Mythic. And the WPN stores are getting the same amount of numbers that you usually get for every other release of the set. So I still even think with Flusterstorm that this card isn't going to go up based upon the new demand from Modern, and the buy box promos are actually going to be able to inject enough supply for the card to even go down, even though that is now legal in Modern. But we're going to have to wait and see. I could see it going other ways. We've seen crazier things happen in Magic. We've seen bigger bull markets or bull rushes happen where it just led to an explosion in player bases or brewing decks, and when the dust settled, the supply was less than the demand, and these cards went up. All right, so with that out of the way, though, let's just talk about the spoilers here. So we got Exclude, which is a fun card in Pauper for sure. It's a card I played with during Standard, during Invasions block. Very, very powerful card. Not sure it's going to really shake up the format at all because we already have 1 mana more spell that basically counters a spell and draws a card and gives you more modes, which I think is more flexible. Is exactly where if you're going to be paying 3 mana for a counter spell, you're pretty much going to be able to pay 4 mana. That's the big jump in Modern, is from 2 to 4 a lot of the times. The 3 doesn't matter as much. Diabolical Edict would have been a card that would have been welcome in the format, except for Liliana's Triumph was just spoiled. Not going to really have any impact because Liliana's Triumph is just strictly better, especially if Liliana's in your deck. We have some interesting things in the form of Snow. If anything is going to save the Modern Horizons set so far from what we've seen, yes, there's a ton of mythics left, yes, there's a ton of rares left, but the signals we've been getting is that this set needs some sort of land to really draw people into to be able to keep its box EV and really draw people into buying the Modern Horizons. So I'm going to call it right now. I'm expecting a dual land that is legendary. So legendary duels. Snow lands with maybe no drawback. Maybe there is some sort of drawback with snow permanents. Maybe they print something that is really good against snow permanents. And why I'd make it legendary is because then you can only have one in your deck. It's not strictly better than Shocklands as the legendary rule applies to it. I don't know, maybe some sort of other clause I can put on it, but I'm expecting some sort of dual Snowland to really try and sell the set. That's the way they can get around the reserve list. I think that's the only real reason to put Snow in this set is to have those dual lands, which Mero's hinted at in his blog-a-talk before. So don't quote me on it. No inside information here, but it makes sense to me at this point. So the Indomitable Treefolk is just one in many of the snow permanents that have been spoiled. This one's power and toughness equals the number of snow permanents you control, which makes you think you probably want some sort of dual snow land if it's a 2-color snow creature. And when it is a battlefield, tap target creature opponent controls, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So this is mainly a draft card, not going to impact Modern. Fist of the Flame. We'll be talking about this card in a bit because I think that if Pauper didn't want some of the cards that were banned today, I think Fist of the Flame would have made Kiln Fiend just insanely tough to deal with Fist of the Flame being such a very relevant card to just finish off the game with a Kiln Fiend, especially spells-based Kiln Fiend deck. Don't really see it seeing much play in Standard. Possibly you could, or excuse me, in a Modern. Possibly you could, it's a build-around card, but again, it's not going to impact it. Of course, it's a common, though. We're seeing some other filler cards for the draft format, like Undead Augur. Whenever another zombie you control dies, you draw a card and lose a life. Pretty decent little card, but I don't think it's on the power level, again, of Modern. It might make a Gary deck worthwhile, or what we call a mono black devotion deck, especially with a zombie theme to it. But that slot is already very, very congested, and they have some extremely good cards in that 2 black mana spot. Having a card just replace itself and lose a life, I don't know if an Elvish Visionary is exactly what they want in this particular slot. Again, it's a very good draft card if we see some sort of devotion strategy or devotion in this master set, in this Modern Horizon set. Then we'll know exactly why it was put in here. We have the Munitions Expert, which again is an interesting card, other than it is a red-black. So it's like, okay, we're going to push Goblins maybe into a black. Because this is something I think Black or Goblins does want in Modern. When it enters the battlefield, you may have it deal damage to target creature or creature or planeswalker. I misread this. Never mind. I thought it said creature or planeswalker. Equal number of goblins you control. So not quite sure again if this is anywhere where Modern wants to be. Definitely not. Factor Fiction, very, very good card historically. I think it absolutely will see play in the might bring back the Pyromancer's Ascension type decks with Factor Fiction. And it might just actually I don't see Factor Fiction replacing Gifts Ungiven in Storm, but it might be a good alternative or even addition, maybe replacing piece of the puzzle. Again, don't quote me on that for fact or fiction. Then we have this interesting signal as far as mythics are concerned with Seasoned Pyromancer. This has led to a lot of groaning on different various social medias about where if this is going to be a kind of a master's price set, that the mythic should be better than something like a Seasoned Pyromancer. Seasoned Pyromancer is a 3 mana for a 2/2. When Pyromancer enters the battlefield, discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. For each non-land card discarded this way, you create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. So it's basically going to be a Pia and Karandalar, which does see play in Modern. It's actually very good in some of the prison-based strategies as a way to clog up the board until you do have what you need. You're going to get 4 power on board for 3 mana, and it doesn't really cost you anything. The loot effect is actually quite reasonable with loot-type strategy we already have with Hollowed One and with Dredge. I don't really see it going in either one of them because the converted mana cost of 3 is very, very tough for both of those decks. They want to be really getting that engine going before they spend 3 mana for it. And the Exiling Seasoned Pyromancer is good, though, to create 2 more red elemental creature tokens in a sort of dredge or discard-based strategy. So I would not be surprised if this does see some sort of play, maybe more of a sideboard, maybe in a Faithless Looting other type deck that gets some advantage off of discarding cards. Again, we'll just have to wait and see. A lot of people are also disappointed because they thought that the Omnicat cycling or discard mechanic would have been put in the set, and it seems like so far we just have things that trigger off of cycling, not cycling and discard. All right, so then we have the next of the earlier spoils that people are excited about with the Force of Vigor, another free spell. So if it's not your turn, you can exile a green card to destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. It is decently relevant. There are enchantments and artifacts that are relevant to do while you can tap out and destroy them instant speed. So Force of Vigor will definitely be relegated to sideboards, but it's going to be a welcome addition to Modern for many. I particularly don't like free spells. I think that the problems that I have with Modern personally are due to kind of that time period where these still existed. We're talking about like Cold Snap, early Ravnica, Kamigawa, 8th edition. I think most of the problematic cards in Modern existed in that time period, and they've been able to clean up Magic as far as more fair Magic in the latter, what they call the New World Order, Magic 2.0. Now it's kind of frustrating to me they're bringing this sort of stuff back, but it also shows that they want to go like all hands off Modern. If it's going to become degenerate, we need to add these free type stuff. Then we have a Commander card that everyone's excited about with a Morphon the Boundless, which will drive some sales because this is a very, very popular card so far in the Commander groups that I've spoken to. With the Changeling, enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, and the spells of the chosen type cost 1 color mana of each type less, and those creatures get +1/+1. Each other creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1. So there's already some crazy combos that people have figured out with the Morphon the Boundless. Talking about this in Slivers, this in Dragons, this in a Joda deck. Reduces the amount of many of these type of changeling type or these creature tribal based cards, but I just don't know if I see it as a place in Modern right now. This is just throwing a bone to Commander players, which again is very, very weird for Modern Horizons to signal that. Flusterstorm, we've talked about it in the past. We knew about that one. We have this one that was spoiled with the to pay a life, so it's a fetch land for basic lands. This was interesting. It works pretty good with Delirium based strategies. Even if you're in a 2-color deck, it's pretty decent to get around or just to get a card in the graveyard and go and get a basic land. Many decks might prefer this in like Blood Moon type decks where they're going to get basics anyway. So if you're in a 2-color Blood Moon deck, I could see this team play, but it is just strictly worse than the vast majority of fetch lands. Like even in a 5-color deck, you would rather have a fetch land because it can go get 2 of the pairings you can use for later on. People have talked about Burn might actually want this. I disagree. I think the Naya Burn does not want Prismatic Vista. Maybe 2-color Burn if they want to play a basic Plains, but usually you don't want to do that. So again, I'm not sold on this card really having a huge demand for Modern format, but again, this is a great card for Commander. So it's almost looking like this is Commander Horizons with a bunch of the cards that have been spoiled. We have the Icewing Codal, which looks interesting for Modern with the flash flying, and it draws a card, so it's like an Elvish Visionary with flash and flying, so pretty good roadblock for like the Sultai decks, and it has Death Touch as long as you control at least 3 other snow-covered permanents. Sure, kind of interesting. So after turn 3, it could get bigger, which makes me really, really believe that there is going to be 2-colored snow lands. Otherwise, both of these cards look very, very weak, especially at rare, to try to impact the Modern format. So we come down here. We've talked about some of these, I think, in the other videos. No, we haven't talked about this. We have Firebolt and the Goblin Matron reprint. Firebolt is interesting, probably not good enough. For 2 damage to any target, a lot of creatures come out already as 3/3s, like the Wild and the Coddle. There's a reason why Lightning Bolt is so good. It's a very balanced card for how much damage it can do to the player, and it can kill most of the problematic creatures. Firebolt gets interesting because we've had cards like this in the past that need to be 2-for-1s that have seen play in Modern. So, if Delver ever came back, for example, and you need to grind out Delver Young Pyromancer decks, this could be a welcome addition to the format. Goblin Matron 2 is pretty neat. It's definitely, Goblin decks will be able to utilize it to then go get goblins. We might have some sort of goblin ball type strategy, be able to come out of the woodworks rather than just like an all hyper aggressive deck. It can also go get you those specific goblins like the bushwhackers that are so good. All right, so the Force of Negation, people have been bemoaning this because most people wanted Force of Will, and this is just like a more of a sideboard Force of Will. So Force of Negation is good if you want to use it to break up combo, but it doesn't protect your own threats, and it's actually not that great way of dealing with your opponent's non-combo threats. There's just better counterspells at that point. So people haven't really thought that Force of Negation is going to be the really selling point of the set either. The Deep Forest Hermit is a big signal that this is Modern Horizons was just like a playground for them to reprint reserve list cards with different names that do very similar things. So the Deep Forest Hermit is very, very similar to like the Deranged Hermit. Instead of having Echo, it has Vanishing, and it has 4 squirrels, and squirrels get +1/+1. The Wing Shard's got a reprint. I don't know how relevant that will be in Modern. Interesting though. It probably is good enough for Modern. For target player to sacrifice an attacking creature for the storm count. Seems pretty good here. And then we have some filler cards in the form of Choking Tethers and Savage Swipe. Savage Swipe is a new card, and it does, I believe it's a new card. Target creature pursues 2 until in a turn, and if its power is 2, then it fights a creature. So that's all I'm going to talk about so far for the set. Some interesting popper cards to look at, but all in all, this is so far a bad signal for the set. There isn't a lot of selling points at the moment. There's a lot more watered down cards than we expected for a set that was really going to supposedly ramp up the format. Again, it's still early. We'll have to wait and see what it does, but so far a lot of people are in the meh category. So that's another reason I think that those dual snow-covered lands are going to come out, whether they be the shock versions, whether they be a legendary land that is just a bayou but snow-covered. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We'll talk about now just going over to the banned and restricted. Oh, first of all, let's just go over the prices from the Modern Horizons. We still have Sarah the Benevolent at $45. We saw the Force of Negation at $33 and the Prismatic Vista. Both of these are rare, so these are definitely overpriced, with the Morph on the Boundless at $28 and the Seasons Pyromancer at $18. So the prices are pretty bullish right now for all of these. Of course, the snow-covered lands are way too high, and we have some of these uncommons and whatnot that are also too high. If we go over here to the banned and restricted announcement for Pauper, we have Gush, Gitaxian Pros, and Daze are banned, and they're keeping an eye on Voltron and Monarch, which I think is exactly what they should do. If I were to give my assessment of Pauper of where it's going to be headed, right now I still would invest in Pauper. What I really think we need for Pauper is we need some solid support. They need to ramp up the support even more for the format. Instead of just having well, we did have the qualifier for Pauper, so that's a good good start. I think we need more regional qualifiers. I think they need to promote it at maybe not the local game store level, but at least at the regional level to give an MCQ for Pauper. And I think that this format will absolutely take off. Having just one every few GPs is not enough for the format to, I wouldn't say succeed, because it's definitely successful, to really grow. So with that being said, I'd rather have an announcement like that for investing in Pauper. However, this will shake up the format with Gush, Gitaxian Probes, and Days banned. So what was happening in the format were blue decks that traditionally were bad against Tron were, with the printing of foil, really ramped it up to where they could tempo out Tron. And so instead of having Achilles heel, they just didn't have a bad matchup, and it basically was all Gush decks. Gush decks just took over the meta. You had burn decks and Gush decks. And there have been times in Pauper where burn is absolutely terrible. It's because when the format wants to be ready for burn, burn gets shut down. There's plenty of life gain cards that make it miserable for burn to be a tier 1 deck. And I think we're going to go back to that meta. I think that burn is just going to take over week 1, and then people are like, okay, well, I got to throw 10 sideboard slots like we used to for burn, and that will be the end of burn, because everyone is when it's the boogeyman, it's a deck that can be shut down. So expect to see a lot more life gain base cards like Pulse of Marasa start showing up in more lists, and like Elves going hardcore back on the life gain strategy to combat with burn. I actually think that Monarch decks are in a worse place, because Tron is one of the worst matchups for Monarch decks, and Tron will be on the rise. And I'm expecting it to be a life gain strategy Tron that is going to see out the gates of week 1, and that is very, very miserable for Monarch decks, because the only hope that they had in Tron in the past was going the Heavy Galvanic Blast or the Rally the Peasants route, where they can dish off a bunch of burst damage, have game against Tron, and still do very good against like the Delver and aggro-based decks. Speaking of aggro, we could see a resurgence in aggro for the format. Stompy might start looking good when we're going up against more of a like aggro mirrors. If Stompy does very good against other aggro-based decks. Elves is another deck that really stands out to me. The only deck that really got killed from this banning is the Inside Out combo. I even think Kiln Fiend losing Gitaxian Probe is tough, and Days. However, Kiln Fiend is still a very viable deck. There's other ways to play the deck besides going Degenerate on Gush and Gitaxian Probe. So overall, I think these cards did need to get banned. The more cards get printed into the mix, the more busted these type of effects become, and it's just a matter of when, not if, these were banned. These were cards that are banned in other formats, like Gush and Gitaxian Probe are already banned in other formats. And Days is kind of the odd man out here, because a lot of decks didn't even run a full playset of Days. It was just a here and there type card. However, it's any sort of banning for blue, in my opinion, is welcome for the format, as it was really turning into a blue or burn base meta. If we come back over here, we can take a look at the format over in Pauper, and you can see it was on the format staples. It was all blue Gush-based decks, so that should get shaken up. So it's burn and blue decks. So if we go back over here to the decks for Pauper, you can see that burn was starting to take over in the highest amount of played with 20% of the meta. When I started doing Pauper videos, one thing I like to brag about Pauper is you rarely ever got up over 10% of the meta, and that's usually even if you added up all the Tron variants and added up all the Delver. So in one deck controls 20% of the meta, and if you actually come over here and add up all the blue-black Delvers, you can see exactly what I was talking about. So 12%, or so 13% there, 17, we're up to 30%. This is basically a Delver deck with blue-red control, so up to 37%, and then even so it's almost about 40% blue black Delver, 20% burn. That only is about 40% to be showcased around the rest of the strategy, and those were all Monarch decks and Tron decks after that. So so the format was not in a healthy place. There needed to be some changes. We might see some resurgence in decks like this White Heroic deck to fight burn. It does very good against burn. This leaves us open to a plethora of decks. So I have a Pauper Battle Box, and most of the decks are competitive, and we should start seeing a bunch of the old school ones like Affinity start to shine again because of being able to compete now in a gushless format. So that's really all I have for the Market Monday. I'll try to give a more financial detail of some of the Modern Horizons. Again, I am in camp A here. I think that the supply of this is going to be insanely high. I think the one saving grace that it probably will happen, because they do want to sell these boxes. They want to prove that this is a sustainable thing they can release like every 2 years. So I'm expecting there to be a conspiracy set and then a Horizon set, or like a Battle Bond set, then a Modern set. Then they're going to go back and forth, odd year, even year. One for Modern, one for more of the casual, for the Commander crowd. And they want to prove that this is a successful model. They want to be able to justify the price point. We're going to see something crazy, and it's got to be in the form of either artifacts or lands to really push the set. And in my opinion, it's those snow lands are coming. Anyway, your thoughts in the comment section below are always appreciated. I hope you enjoyed this Market Monday video. This has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.